"We're not paying for this spectacle," my mom said, her voice smooth, final, slicing through everything. Just like that, my wedding plans, my future, the life I was building, all wiped away in a single breath. My sister didn't even look up properly. "Try again next time," she muttered, her smile thin and amused, like this was entertainment. Dad kept quiet, the way he always did whenever she decided who I was allowed or not allowed to become. I could have shouted. I could have asked why they always pulled the ground out from under me. Instead, I said one word, understood, and walked out. They expected me to crumble. They expected me to return, small and apologetic, like I always had. But 3 weeks later, when everything around them started falling apart, they finally realized what understood really meant. And it all started with one unexpected phone call. From the outside, my family looked perfect enough to be on the front of a brochure. The brick house with trimmed lawns, the practiced smiles, the Sunday dinners that were never optional. But inside those walls, every laugh came with conditions. My mother, Carol, shaped our lives like she was molding clay, strict, polished, and painfully controlled. Everything from how we spoke to how we breathed felt regulated. My father, Robert, followed behind her like a shadow, agreeing with every decision she made, as if disagreeing would crack the world in half. And then there was Shannon, my mother's golden child, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong even when she absolutely did. When I was young, I wanted to design clothes. I filled notebooks with patterns, textures, ideas. One day, Mom caught me bent over my drawings. She held the sketchbook between 2 fingers like it was something filthy, then tossed it into the trash without blinking. "You're not throwing your life away on daydreams," she said. Dad stood next to her, nodding, silent approval. That was the day I learned that quiet compliance made life easier. Not happier, just easier. Eventually, I became exactly what they wanted. Reliable, predictable, an accountant with a safe salary and no room for frivolous creativity. Shannon went into marketing, creative enough to sound sophisticated, but acceptable enough to pass the Carol test. When she opened her boutique, Mom lit up the entire neighborhood, celebrating a backyard party with champagne and twinkle lights. She kept bragging about her daughter's natural flair. My mother could compliment Shannon for breathing, but I had never been allowed a fraction of that freedom. Then came Eric. I met him at a local fundraiser, the type of event my parents mocked as small-town filler. He worked with kids at a nonprofit, had the kind of laugh that softened a room, and asked questions no one else bothered to ask. With him, I didn't feel like a disappointment or a project. I felt like a person. The first time I brought him home, Mom's smile tightened. "What do you do?" she asked. When he explained, her mouth twitched into a polite shape that wasn't quite a smile. "Very noble," she said. Dad added, "At least he's kind, like kindness was a flaw he might outgrow." Shannon whispered, "So, ambition's optional now, I guess," and giggled into her drink. For 3 years, he stayed beside me through their judgment. We planned our wedding slowly, carefully. The Ivy House, simple, elegant, was our dream venue. We saved everything ourselves, so when Mom suddenly offered to contribute, I let myself believe maybe something in her had shifted. Maybe she could meet me halfway. I should have seen the trap. The morning she asked me to visit, I thought it was about centerpieces or seating charts, but when I stepped into the living room, the air felt rigid. Mom stood beside the fireplace, arms crossed. Shannon lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if she owned the place. Dad stared at the floor like it might answer for him. "We're not paying for this circus," Mom said. "Better luck next time," Shannon added, not even glancing up. The words slapped me. Quick, humiliating, deliberate. I felt heat sting behind my eyes, but I refused to cry in front of them. I straightened my spine, nodded once, and replied, "Understood." Silence followed. Not relief, confusion. Mom frowned slightly, unsure why I wasn't begging. Shannon smirked, convinced she had won. But they hadn't realized yet that the old version of me was gone. My silence wasn't surrender. It was the end. The drive back felt endless. Gray clouds hung low, pressing down on everything. My phone shook with calls from Eric, but I let it ring. I needed the quiet, the buzz of tires on asphalt, something steady enough to keep me from shattering. By the time I reached home, the shaking in my hands had eased only slightly. Our invitation cards sat neatly on the counter, soft gold edges catching the kitchen light. I stared at them until the air felt tight, then slid every last one into a box and pushed it aside. Eric came over as the sun dipped. He took one look at me and stopped in the doorway. What happened? They canceled everything, I said flatly. His eyebrows shot up. Canceled? They can't do that. They did. They called every vendor, every reservation. It's all gone. He stepped closer, searching my expression like he expected me to fall apart. Do you want me to talk to them? I shook my head. No. It's my turn now. Later, digging through an old drawer, I found something I thought was long gone. My high school sketchbook. Bent edges, smudged pencil marks, the sketches of clothes I once dreamed of making. Mom had thrown the original away, but this one I'd hidden. I ran my thumb along the curves of a dress I designed at 14, and something sharp flared in my chest. Not sadness, defiance. The word understood were keyed in my mind. It had always meant, you win. It doesn't anymore. In the days that followed, I listed out every contract, every financial detail connected to the wedding. Something in the timing bothered me. They canceled too fast, too neatly. I called the Ivy House the next morning. The coordinator hesitated before speaking. I'm so sorry, Miss Perry, but we already received your cancellation form. My what? She cleared her throat. It had your signature. My stomach dropped. Someone had signed my name. Someone had pretended to be me. I hung up and stared at the phone at the faint reflection of my own stunned face. This wasn't interference. It was erasure. The next morning, I went straight to Diane Cole, the attorney who once handled my company's legal work. A brilliant woman with sharp eyes and a sharper pen. When I explained everything, she didn't look surprised, just determined. Let me see the paperwork, she said. I handed her every document I had. She scanned them like a machine, tapping her pen on the desk. Then she stopped. This cancellation form, she murmured. That's not your handwriting. I leaned closer. My name dragged across the bottom of the form, shaky and wrong. Diane looked at me. Someone forged this. And if they used your financial accounts for anything, they committed fraud. The word hung in the air. Heavy. Icy. Fraud. This wasn't just cruel, this was criminal. We spent hours digging through transactions. Payments I didn't authorize, transfers I didn't make, renovations paid with my money, thousands funneled into Shannon Peary designs, thousands more covering my parents' debts. They used your funds, Diane said quietly, and I doubt that's the worst of it. That night, I sat alone in the dark, laptop glowing on the table. Mom's cutting voice replayed in my head. Shannon's smirk, Dad's silence. The pieces connected with sickening clarity. This wasn't about the wedding. It was about burying something deeper. The next day, my phone rang. Uncle Stephen's name lit up the screen. We rarely spoke, so the tension in his voice unsettled me immediately. Elena, there's something you ought to know. It's about your grandfather's trust fund. My breath caught. What about it? He hesitated before speaking. He left you $250,000. It's been in your name since before he died, but it only unlocks when you get married. And your parents, they've been accessing it. I checked the records myself. The air left my lungs.
You're saying they've been using the money for years? Stephen said softly. Shannon's business, the house remodel. All from your trust. If you'd gotten married, it would have triggered a full audit. They had to stop it. I pressed a hand over my mouth. My own family hadn't just stolen from me. They'd destroyed my future to keep it hidden. After the call, I sat still for a long time. The anger came slowly, quietly, like a storm forming over still water. I opened my laptop, typed a message to Diane. or filing the case. Then I whispered to no one but myself. They wanted control. Now they'll get consequences. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Rows of strangers whispered behind me, the hum of air conditioning drowning out my heartbeat. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Diane, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles ached. Across the aisle, my family looked smaller than I remembered. Mom's hair was perfect as always, but her pearls didn't shine the same under fluorescent light. Dad's tie was crooked. Shannon scrolled on her phone until the bailiff told her to stop. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Case number 4721. Perry versus Perry, the clerk announced. The words stung more than I'd expected. Diane began calmly. Your Honor, this case involves the unauthorized use of my client's financial assets and a forged signature on legally binding documents. We intend to show that Eleanor Perry's parents and sister not only interfered with her wedding plans, but also misappropriated her inheritance. Mom leaned toward her attorney, whispering something sharp. She didn't like losing control of the story. Diane laid out everything: the forged cancellation form, the bank withdrawals, the payments funnel to Shannon's boutique. She passed copies to the judge, each page landing with a soft, deliberate slap. Then came the trust fund. Uncle Stephen took the stand, looking uneasy in his suit. My father, Eleanor's grandfather, set up a trust of $250,000 for her. It would release upon her marriage. I recently discovered funds missing. Who withdrew them? Diane asked. He swallowed hard. Robert and Carol Perry. The courtroom rippled. Mom's lawyer objected. Irrelevant. The fund was managed within family rights. Diane's tone stayed calm. Family rights don't cover fraud. Mom's eyes darted toward me, sharp and cold. You don't understand, Eleanor. We were trying to protect you. That boy, Eric, he's beneath you. He would have dragged you down. I met her gaze. Protect me by stealing from me. Her voice cracked. We only used what we needed. Shannon was drowning in debt. We couldn't just let her fail. Maybe she should have, I said quietly. Maybe it would have taught her what accountability looks like. Shannon slammed her hand on the table. You think you're better than us? You've always been the boring one. Our parents did everything for you. The judge rapped his gavel once. Order. Diane turned to Shannon. Miss Perry, did your parents transfer any of your boutique expenses from Eleanor's trust? Shannon hesitated, her confidence fading. I didn't know where the money came from. Really? Diane lifted a document. Because this invoice for your boutique renovation lists your father's signature and Eleanor's trust account number. Shannon's face drained of color. By the time Diane rested her case, every secret was on the table. Mom tried to play the martyr, Dad mumbled half-hearted apologies, and Shannon cried into a tissue she didn't really use. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was steady, cold, final. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. All funds misappropriated from the trust are to be returned immediately. Additional damages of $50,000 will be awarded for fraud and emotional distress. Mom's breath hitched. Dad's shoulders collapsed. Shannon stared at me with pure disbelief. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just exhaled for the first time in months. Outside the courthouse, the sky was clear, a rare blue that felt almost staged. Reporters weren't there. No crowd. Just quiet. Diane turned to me. You did it. I just stopped them, I said. That's all. A week later, I stood at the Ivy House again, the same archway where my mother's words had haunted me. But this time, it was mine. The garden lights flickered softly, tables draped in white linen, simple and elegant. Eric waited at the end of the aisle, his tie slightly crooked, his smile unwavering. Owen waved from the second row. Uncle Stephen gave a proud nod. And Diane, who never smiled much, actually did. When the music started, I felt my throat tighten. No mother adjusting my veil, no father walking me down the aisle, just me walking myself. Every step felt like reclaiming something stolen. As I reached Eric, he whispered, "You okay?" "I'm more than okay," I said, and meant it. We said our vows, quietly, not for show, not for anyone else. The officiant pronounced us husband and wife, and for a moment all I could hear was the wind through the ivy and the faint sound of laughter. Real laughter. After the ceremony, I slipped away for a moment, standing beneath the same oak tree where I once cried after everything fell apart. I looked up at the lights and thought about how silence had become my weapon. My mother once called my wedding a circus. Now it was peace. Inside, music and warmth filled the air. Eric caught my hand and pulled me to dance. The world blurred, faces, lights, all of it. When the night ended, I wrote one last email. Simple, clean. Carol, Robert, Shannon. The court showed who you are. I wish you the best, but this is goodbye. I hovered for a second, then hit send. Outside, crickets hummed. Eric wrapped his arm around me, and for the first time in years, I felt free. A few weeks later, the calls began. First Mom, then Dad, then Shannon. Each one left a message that sounded the same. Soft voices, forced apologies, a little tremble for sympathy. "We just want to talk, sweetheart. Can we meet just once? Things got out of hand." I didn't answer. The phone buzzed on the counter while I folded laundry, cooked dinner, lived my life. Every vibration felt weaker than the last. Then came the voicemail that made me pause. Mom's voice, brittle and tired. "Your father lost his job. Shannon's boutique, it's gone. We're trying to start over. We need help." I stared at the wall. Not angry anymore, just hollow. They had taken enough from Owen. I later heard the full story. Dad laid off after a scandal, Mom working part-time at a department store, Shannon drowning in debt. The same people who once dictated my life couldn't even keep their own afloat. One night, the calls started again, back to back to back. The screen lit up with their names. I picked it up, typed slowly, and sent one text. "The circus is already full." Then I placed the phone face down, poured myself a glass of wine, and went back to sketching under the soft kitchen light. The next morning, sunlight poured through the window, warm and quiet. Eric kissed my forehead before leaving for work, and I sat at my desk surrounded by fabric swatches and half-finished sketches. My first design line was taking shape. Mine, not theirs. Freedom didn't feel loud. It felt still, steady, earned. I glanced at my phone on the table. No new calls, no apologies, just silence. The kind that finally meant peace. Mom once said my wedding was a circus. Maybe she was right, because now the show was over, and I was the one who walked away smiling. If you've ever had to choose yourself over family, tell me in the comments. Hit subscribe, there's always another story.